We're going to get going with our last panel of the day. So if you could get back to seats. And we are now fully into the enterprise-focused portion of our day, with one panel and then the remaining enterprise-focused demos. So the panel is with Steve from GE and three of our most purely enterprise-focused bot camp companies. So I will let Steve take it from here, but Steve and three bot campers who will all be better at speaking with themselves than I am. Anyway, with that, Steve.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Steve Pepe. I lead customer experience for GE. It's kind of fun having GE here today and some other colleagues. We're interested in bots for how do you solve different customer problems in my case. And I'm excited to talk to the panelists today. We've gotten to know each other a little bit in some pre-talk. And I thought what I'd do is ask a basic question to open. That way it serves as a nice way of introducing yourselves and your companies. So the basic question is, we all love bots today. We're all kind of obsessed with the solution, but what's the problem you're trying to solve? Like, how did you pick that as your first problem? Tell us a little bit about that problem as you introduce your company.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellen, CEO and co-founder of CareerLark. So we build Slack apps that help companies with performance feedback and employee engagement. And I actually want to answer your question by telling you a little bit more about myself. So I actually worked at Google when Google went from 3,000 to 20,000 people in 3 years. I actually worked really closely with Sheryl Sandberg's managers, her organization, including Kim Malone-Scott, who's written extensively on this topic under Radical Candor. So I worked with a group of managers who were really great at giving me real-time feedback to my face after meetings, the good, the bad, the ugly, after deliverables. So at first it was really jarring, but I found that it was really helpful for me for my career development and just personal progression. So I grew to really love it. And when I left Google to go to business school at Harvard Business School, I actually thought this was the way that most companies worked because I didn't know any better, only to find out that actually 99.99999% of companies do not operate this way. So I've been a huge believer of continuous feedback 10 years ago before it became trendy, and it's something that I've offered to all my teams, my reports, but the technology really wasn't there, in my opinion, to really facilitate and enable it until maybe a year ago when my team and I, we started to look at this problem again. And there's a really big macro trend in the HR world right now of continuous feedback. It's just the insecurity around managing millennials. How do you retain them? How do you motivate them? So we became really interested in this topic. We actually spent 6 months developing prototypes on mobile apps, native, web, just different forms, and none of them really worked, really felt right, until we stumbled onto chat platforms when Slack opened up the app directory end of last year. So at that point, we realized, actually, we had a pain point that was in search of a solution, and this was actually a particularly great solution to solve this problem. So we went all in on Slack and decided to build apps that really facilitated micro-feedback.
I love that because the pain point being you don't get that on an ongoing basis.
Exactly.
Bot being one way you could solve that. So RDM, how about from your side? What was the problem you guys set out to solve?
Sure. I'm Artyom, CEO and co-founder of StatsBot. And actually when we started working on StatsBot, it was my own problem at my previous job. We were a pretty remote team and all our discussions happened to be in Slack. And we used a lot of tools like any company use right now for analytics, say for any data storage. We used a lot of Google Analytics and Mixpanel. And we had our all team meetings happening in Slack, so all decision making in Slack. It was a pattern in teams that someone just go to Google Analytics or Mixpanel, take a screenshot, and upload the screenshot of data to Slack. And I thought about that we have all this place where like all decision happens in Slack, and this decision needs data to rely on, and just lack of this data. And I'm just thinking about to build a bot that could bring data to collaboration, to make this collaboration more data driven. And it works very well. I mean, it's one of the most use cases our users use, not only for remote teams. It's pretty useful to be on a meeting in a physical space and to be able to to answer some questions pretty quickly, not like, hey, I will back in a couple days with you with this data answer just right now. Getting the data, like how many signups, how many transaction e-commerce, or how much we sell this particular product. Yeah.
I like that because it's a problem that you experienced firsthand, as you shared as well. And so, Dan, how about from your side? Very interested in Coach Otto. We got a glimpse of it at GE actually a couple weeks ago, I remember. So tell us a little bit about the pain point that you started with.
Yeah. So Coach Otto, you'll see the demo in a bit, but it's a conversational AI that lets you practice for important conversations at work. So it'll put you through a role play, and you get to practice having, a tough conversation whether it's like managing expectations for your boss or giving some tough feedback to someone on your team, to Ellen's point. But it lets you practice ahead of time. And the problem is we thought, how much more productive could companies and individuals be if there wasn't so much stress and hesitation involved in having tough conversations, if people were just more confident, more prepared to go and say the thing that needed to be said because they knew that they were conveying it in an effective way that was actually likely to get results. So that's what we're hoping to do.
Interesting. Now, I guess my follow-up then is, Artem, maybe I'll ask you first, is did you set out to build an enterprise bot? It's an interesting category. I was actually encouraged to see enterprise as like the most common of the applicants to bot camp. Is that where you definitely put yourself, or is this just happen to be a problem that folks that work in enterprise feel?
So I think I used to work in company. It's not was big company, but it was 50 employees, so medium-sized company. We initially thought about that StatsBot could be a good fit for small and medium businesses, but it turns out that a lot of big enterprise have a problem of data. So as a company is bigger, the more data they have, it's harder to track all changes in data. You can say you can have some changes which correlate with some kind of metric in other system, and just all falling down, and you never find out why. And it's something useful to build with a proactive notification to give you in advance to say, hey, you have a problem here. And it's pretty useful for big enterprises, I think, where you have a lot of data, you cannot keep track of it.
Dan, how about you? I mean, was it an enterprise thing from the start? Because this is feedback that almost everyone could use, right?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, we expect to go to everyone, any type of tough conversation that you need to have, whether it's personal or business. But we look at enterprise as just a more efficient lever to really make an impact. And so a lot more gets done through companies, and companies are big users of Slack. That's another thing. We're building on Slack, and so it kind of made a natural fit to start there, and then kind of from that high point of showing big impact and big gains in productivity, start to trickle out into personal applications.
So scale really is probably the most common thing there.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. How about you, Ellen?
I think for us, we have a lot of personal empathy for the problem that we're solving, and I'm sure you guys can all think back to the time when you didn't get a lot of feedback and you're blindsided by a review, and it's where is this coming from? And I think we've all had those moments. We've all lost great people that we worked with because they were not be able to voice their opinions. So for us, definitely started from a personal, how do we actually help ourselves and our friends really, to solve this problem. So that's one place. Having said that, I think the line between consumer and enterprise is actually maybe a little bit blurrier than in the past. Even if you look at the way that Slack is adopted, it's adopted in almost a very bottoms-up consumer-like fashion, right? So, I think in terms of the way we think about our product, it is enterprise SaaS in the sense that is how we charge business model, but there's a lot of parts of our product and business that actually behaves similar to consumer products. And actually, we think there is a really big gap there for us to solve. We actually have a very interdisciplinary background. My co-founder, Gary, she used to head product for messaging at Twilio, so very deep enterprise SaaS experience. She also made games at Zynga, so very consumer games engagement DNA. I myself also have experience working at a mobile gaming startup. So for us, a lot of what we think through is how do we bring that interesting, delightful consumer-like experience into enterprise software and tools, because we think that when we do that, then it will be very obvious to companies on why they should adopt and use and buy our product.
It's very interesting. Did you want to follow up on that? No,
I mean,
you gave
agree
me that look.
wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Actually, so a question I'll take from there, and then Artyom, I want to come back to a specific problem I've had around stats. But we chatted beforehand about this idea of we're all trying to put emotion into bots, right? We're trying to train bots and get them to understand the back and forth that comes in human emotion and conversation. It's tricky because emotion is very much like a chemical thing that belongs to humans. So you had some interesting thoughts about how you are trying to tackle that. Maybe Dan, you could take that one first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it gets a little bit deep into how we approach our conversational AI, but at a high level, we employ machine learning, but we also aid it with human tagging. So we have a lot of humans kind of reading transcripts and indexing and understanding what's happening in the conversation and providing kind of a scaffolding that lets us maintain coherence when we present these role-playing scenarios that you chat through. And what I was saying, how we might approach solving that is using our human taggers to, kind of point out what type of emotions are being expressed in a given situation. It's a hard problem, and I'll be frank that we haven't gotten too deep into it yet. But I can see the benefit of it, especially in my application where, one of the criticisms we get is, okay, well, you're giving people practice, but so much of communication is body language or, emotion, to your point. So we want to take steps going down that road. And our vision is, when things get to voice, understanding tone of voice, and all the important elements of communication, we think there's a lot of benefit to focusing on words to start, but inching down that path.
I love that you're doing that because enterprise, I've had 4 bosses and none of them have ever been in the same city I lived in. So how much feedback is traded over email or over Slack message, right? So you're right, body language, sitting across the table from someone, but as you could probably attest, right, feedback doesn't always come that way. So I think it's kind of interesting to hear how you're trying to approach that with human tag. Any follow-ups on that, or what do you guys think about trying to convey emotion and understand tone of voice over conversation?
Well, I think today there's actually now a much more varied way of expressing, for example, using emojis or using GIFs in addition to text. So I actually think that we're at a point where, like, more than ever before, we have these really great range of really expressive ways to communicate emotion, like face-to-face basis. And I think the really great thing is that there's a lot of great companies that are working on technology to understand all of these different meanings and really extract that out of these different types of communication, including GE talked about IBM Watson. And actually one of the great things about BotCamp was that it really opened our eyes to the possibility of all the open source options, alternatives, what's possible, what's young but maybe possible down the road. So I think for us it's really leveraging that resource of the big companies, all the work that they're doing, they're open sourcing and just growing with them.
It's an interesting follow-up. Artyom, so when we talk platforms for a second, I'll just pivot a little bit.
Okay.
But your integrations with all the different data platforms out there, was there a specific reason you started with, I think it's Google Analytics, right, and Salesforce, I believe, are 2 of your first ones?
And Mixpanel.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Tell us a little bit about the BotCamp experience for you and learning of those partnerships and other ones you started to tap into.
Yeah. The specific reason to start with Google Analytics and Mixpanel was, first, we used it at my previous job.
Yep.
And the second one is Google Analytics, the most popular one. So it just allows us to get more users, to get more feedback from users, and just to build a better services because of this feedback. And after Google Analytics, we started thinking about what our next integration could be. And the Mixpanel was kind of closed beta. And we decided that the best way to build a Mixpanel integration is going directly to Mixpanel and just asking them how to build this integration, because talk to product team at Mixpanel and to build some kind of partnership so we can deliver the best service for users. So what we did, we actually have a partnership with Mixpanel. We're talking a lot with Mixpanel product team and to understand what use cases works, what use cases doesn't work. And it's our approach with any partners, any integrations. We want to be partners with integration providers. So we want to build Bitly, we have this integration, Chartbeat, we have this we have this Keen.io, so all our partners. So it's really hard to be a partners with Google Analytics, of course, or like Facebook ads, but
Yeah, it's an interesting problem to solve. We're in meetings a lot, I know, where you'll be asked for numbers, and the common retort is, okay, let me get those numbers and get back to you.
yeah.
That's a huge shame. And even though some of these platforms claim to be on demand, right, you can log in and grab it. It's not the easiest thing to do when you've got 30 seconds. So why take it to conversational, right? Why go to like a chat interface? What was, as you mentioned, you shared screenshots back and
Yeah.
forth, but you think it's more natural in a form of a question as opposed to digging through Google Analytics?
Yeah, sometimes if you know what you want to, like if I know that I want to like get the subscription payments for last week, it's much easier for me just to grab it. It's much easier for me to grab it on a mobile. Sometimes if you don't know what you're looking for, you just go to like web interface, get all the stuff. And we haven't noticed a pattern to work with analytics. People usually just stock up with a couple of metrics they really care about, setting like dashboards. And that's why we build this kind of schedule automated reporting. So we allow users to automate the reporting they already have. So you just get in this like daily, weeklies, and no need to text, no need to go to dashboards. And that's actually how people already work with analytics. They have these screens with dashboards. So right now they just have these screens in Slack as well.
Sure. Interesting. We're going to do one or two more questions and then take any questions from the crowd before we wrap. I guess a selfish question is, I'm curious about BotCamp just because I wasn't part of it, but it's cool being here and like getting to see the demo. So having gone through it and not just built it yourself, but had the interactions with each other, what was like one of your big takeaways you think the crowd would find interesting coming out of BotCamp? It can be nasty too. Don't worry about it. Tell us you hated it if you need to. Yeah.
Peter was an awesome mentor.
There, very good. Okay.
I think one of the things that I realized is that it's just really extremely incredibly difficult to build a good pod, and I think people just underestimate this by spades. And I think seeing these other companies go through the same struggles, just the same lack of technology that seemingly is possible, but it's actually not possible. These are the things that you don't really talk about publicly. So I think one of the most helpful things for us was just being able to have those really frank conversations where it's like, oh, this doesn't work for us, that doesn't work for us, we don't know how to do this, we don't know how to do that. And it's like, oh, well, you don't have a good answer either, so we're all in this together. So, for me, that was actually really helpful.
Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's probably seen it today, so it's no secret, but just the multitude of definitions of what a bot can be that are included in that term. I mean, it's incredible. I think coming into BotCamp, and we knew that we're kind of going deep into conversation, and while not a lot of people are necessarily trying that, at least it's a pretty straightforward implementation. Like, we're trying to create a character that you can talk with, or that can present role plays. But just so many other different interaction models that I didn't expect, and that are evolving incredibly fast. I mean, seeing the companies go in the last 3 months from one starting place to where they are now, it's amazing. I mean, it's early, but it was really exciting.
Very good. RDM, how about you?
Yeah, one of the most valuable things was the ability to share like your thoughts and to ideas around how to build bot and problems with like other bot campers. And since all the company building bots, it's for companies building customers bot, for companies building enterprise bot, it was super valuable to just be able to share your things and to see how others are doing, as Ellen mentioned. And it's really, and what we want to continue after BotCamp, we want to have this conversation with bot campers, with fellow bot campers in the future, just to share ideas and just support each other. And it's really great that no companies in BotCamp are competitive, so it's super valuable to share all and be like pretty clear about it.
That's interesting. So, like Dan, you touched on how seeing what a bot can do, right, just by being around these other companies. Is there a category for enterprise that you're excited about next outside of the one you're in right now, what are some other categories for enterprise that you think
No
are
other
just
category.
completely unscratched?
Yeah, I mean, do you actually have one? I was gonna say I can only see what's like directly in front of my face.
I think task management is
Yeah.
like how they actually do it. So it's pretty popular, but I think it could be pretty good use case.
That's good.
I mean, like, let's be honest here, a lot of enterprise software is not that great. I just really think that across the entire spectrum, like, there's a lot of different areas that could be disrupted significantly by using bots, whether that's the technology or the experience. Just like, obviously we're in HR, but for example, this summer we were using, Abacus, which is an expense managing software, and something as simple as that, being able to approve expenses right in Slack. Oh, now it's just one click instead of 5 clicks of going to a website. Like there's just really hundreds, if not, thousands of examples of our enterprise life. And, I think there's gonna be lots of bots and companies that are created that really, solve a lot of these pain points.
It's interesting. I think some of the examples we've seen today, even, with Warren, that's for freelancers, but enterprises feel that too, right? Getting bills paid is a pain. Getting new vendors set up is very cumbersome. Some of those tasks. I'm encouraged very much by some of the HR examples. And I told Artie I'm on the side. I've been in so many meetings where I get asked to pull data and we scramble. So it's great to see a couple real life pain points being addressed through bots. I'm anxious to see both the demos and what else we kind of have coming up. So with that, we've got just a couple minutes left if there's any questions from the crowd. I can't see. Yes.
The consumer space, Facebook and SMS are ubiquitous. In the enterprise space, Microsoft, IBM, Atlassian are all going off Slack. How important is being cross-platform for an enterprise?
Ooh. Yeah, sure. So the question was, in the consumer space, you see a prevalence for maybe some of the social platforms or SMS, but as more enterprises go to ecosystems like Slack, do you see the need to be totally cross-platform in your bot? So curious for your guys' take.
Definitely, yeah. I'll just tell a quick story. We had a company that we were talking to about starting a pilot program. We had gone in through their design team, and they're big Slack users, and they were like, wow, this is cool. We talked to a director there. She's like, oh, I'd love to use this on my team. Here's the chief learning officer. And we had the conversation, and she loved the interaction, but she was like, there's a war here over, we're a Microsoft shop, and Slack is like trying to infiltrate, but we don't know where it's gonna fall out, and we're not gonna make any decisions until then. So we're really excited about what Microsoft's gonna do to be more Slack-like and open up to bots, and so, yeah, that's.
How do you guys feel about cross-platform?
Yeah, definitely. And not only like Skype or Cisco Spark and other messengers, and we're thinking about heavily email. Email is still like the major communication channel in enterprise, and some bots could actually be used inside email. We have a good examples like Exo.ai, Clara, the scheduling meeting. So we could try to build some more use cases around bot in emails. I think StatsBot could be a really good example to deliver like analytics on emails as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to the points that, these guys cover, I think really you have to think about what is the behavior of the companies and the employees and the users. And, what's really interesting for us is that it's not even that one company adopts one platform. Like if you really look at large companies, like there's a lot of legacy pockets of people who just refuse to move on to these, newfangled Slack or chat. Like there's some people that still use Skype, although a lot of the organization has moved to, Slack. So, I think really like far down the road, the holy grail is to be able to do cross-platform even within a company itself and just reach the user wherever they are at. And fundamentally, if you can do that, then you're really solving the problem of facilitating real-time lightweight communication and adding all these value on top of these platforms.
If I could just add on to it, because from a customer experience standpoint at GE, we have industrial customers, and they could be hanging off a wind turbine in Western Australia, right? Or they could be a midwife in rural India. They don't usually have Slack, right? Or they may not be on some of the platforms that you would think for a bot, So SMS is huge for us as a starting point, but then we quickly think about those cross platforms because these customers are also part of the enterprise and the adoption isn't necessarily there for every platform. So we try to think of one to start with, solve one problem, and then get wide quickly. Time for one last question. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much, panelists. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.